Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Business of Fun podcast. It's me, Dave Wakeman. My guest today is Martin Haigh. He is the former head of Ticketmaster in Asia. And we had a really long conversation. Martin and I are buddies, so this was a good one. This is the first episode that I have recorded since the pandemic. So you'll have to forgive me any stumbles and pauses or badly worded questions, any of that stuff. But we laugh, we joke, we crack up a little bit. So this is a good one. I want to make sure that before I get to the podcast episode, I point you towards a few things. Next week, I'm releasing the podcast today. It's Thursday, July 9th, 2020. On the July 14th and 15th, the NATB, the National Association of Ticket Brokers, is holding a virtual conference. And you can sign up. I'll put a link for it in the show notes, but it's free. And it's a 2-day affair where there's a couple different panels with people all over the industry, the primary and the secondary, to talk about dealing with the pandemic and then what comes next. I'm doing a panel on Wednesday, the 14th of July, with Patrick Ryan from Eventellect, Dr. Corey Gibbs, Ken Sulkey from Las Vegas Tickets, and we're going to be talking about relationships. I think it's going to be really a good conversation. It's going to be really important. And it's after we planned for it yesterday, I think you're going to learn a lot. I learned a lot just from the conversation, having a chance to talk with Patrick and Corey and Ken. I think you're going to learn a great deal. So look for that. Visit the natb.org or search NATB virtual conference, but I'll put a link in the show notes. Also, make sure that you check out the Booking Protect website. It's bookingprotect.com. Booking Protect just recently announced a new partnership with We Are Wellness, who Andy Romero Birkbeck was on the podcast and talked about mental health a few weeks back. But Booking Protect and We Are Wellbeing have come together to offer a mental health assessment checklist, a bunch of mental health tools for folks in the live entertainment, theater, sports industry to help make sure that workers, staff are getting taken care of as well, giving people tools to manage the stress level during the pandemic, helping people keep their mindset right. I've mentioned either here or in the newsletter Talking Tickets about my conversation and how Simon shared with me the Stockdale Paradox and how important that was. Simon keeps preaching to me, WhatsApping me, emailing me and telling me, control what you can control. So Simon has pulled together some stuff for Booking Protect, and We Are Wellness to make sure that people are in the right mental state, have resources to deal with the stress from the pandemic, and hopefully sooner rather than later we'll be able to start getting shows on and getting things back to normal or some semblance of normal. Normal with people in stadiums and theaters and stuff, so it's really tough. But check out bookingprotect.com. Click on the blog. There's a bunch of resources there as far as mental health, moving forward, revenue, things like that. So check it out. Also, I want to point you to WeWillRecover.live. That is an effort put together by my friends Einar and Martin from Activity Stream, along with their great staff. We Will Recover is a bunch of industry partners. Me, Andrew and Carol from the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Birmingham. Angela and Joe from the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Australia. NTIX. I can't even remember. There's just a list of about 25 different people, and they're all slipping my name. Joe Robinson. Tons and tons of people. Resources, classes, checklists, articles, all kinds of great things to help you and your organization get a grip on what we're dealing with. Refocus your strategy. Think through how you're going to come back from the pandemic. You can find all that stuff at WeWillRecover.live. So check that out, WeWillRecover.live. It's a really great initiative. Really get your folks involved. Like I mentioned in the last podcast episode I posted, there's an article from Booking Protect that's there about regaining trust. Trust is a big issue. I know I mentioned the NATB virtual conference for next week. But this trust issue came up a lot in the conversations that I've had in the lead up to the conference because people are a little uncertain. The changing refund strategies, the changing refund policies have left organizations, content producers, ticket buyers, a lot of people uncomfortable with what's going on. So make sure you check out these resources. It's going to take a lot of effort to get everything back up and running. And it's going to take all of us working together, which is the point of next week's NATB virtual conference. But let's get to my guest today, who is Martin Haigh, who is from the UK now, but he spent the last 17 years in Asia. And so I wanted to have Martin on because we have been having a bunch of conversations during the lockdown period because, hey, no commute, no anything. You get a lot of time to catch up with people. And one of the things I was really interested in bringing to you was a different perspective on the Asian market. Number one, because Asia has dealt with the pandemic first. Because the outbreak started in China, they've had a little bit longer to deal with things than we have. Second reason is because of the technological advances that they have made all across Asia and how some of those ideas and some of the technologies and tools and the way they're using them to overcome the pandemic can be helpful to us. And then third, because I think there's a lot of opportunity, and Martin seems to agree with me that there's a great deal of opportunity, maybe better opportunities to look at Asia over the next couple of years than in other places. And so I wanted to have Martin on to talk about that. And we got into it. This one's a pretty long one, so you may even have to break this up. But I think it's worth it because there's a lot of stuff here. I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about what the Asia markets look like, from venue exclusivity to ticketing fees to the nature of ticket companies in Asia versus other parts of the world. We talk about, how Asian ticket companies are siloed and how that creates a problem for people from outside of a certain country to buy tickets. We talk about the future of tickets in Asia and the Middle East with the upcoming things like the World Cup and the Olympics and the Rugby World Cup that just happened, and how that's had an impact on folks. We talk about the differences between the Eastern culture and the Western cultures and what that means to people who are trying to do business in Asia. Right, and basically this was funny because Martin said don't tell his wife, but he goes, Greg told us all we need to know, so you'll have to go back and listen to the Greg Turner episode. We talk about the secondary market in Asia a lot. We cover new revenue streams, right? Ways to think about revenue, how to package events once the pandemic's over, because it might create an opportunity to capture revenue that you may not have before, or to insulate yourself from losing revenue that you might have because of the changing nature of how many people you can have in the seats or in a venue, if you're having outdoor events, all kinds of different things. We talk about a lot about sponsorship activation and different ways to activate sponsors. We talk about even blockchain. We got the whole thing in there. We got a lot done. It is a long one, but we do try to keep it light, and we laugh a lot. I think you can definitely tell that we are cracking jokes most of the time. So without anything more from me, here is my conversation with Martin Haigh on the Business of Fun. I want to welcome my friend Martin Haigh to the Business of Fun podcast. Martin, how are you, man?
I'm very good. Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Yes, I will tell the people listening two things about this. Number one, this is the first one that I've done recorded since the pandemic started. So hopefully that won't deflect from you. My incompetence won't shine through. And then the second thing is is completely that if there's any technical difficulties, they're definitely on me, not Martin. So but it's really awesome to have you here to be the first guy that I'm going to get to talk to. We were introduced by a mutual friend, Greg Turner, who's been on before. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about, how do people are going to recover. I think you bring a really nice perspective on Asia, innovation, technology, and a really, really bunch of a lot of cool stuff. So I'm excited for people to hear from you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I will do an introduction for you before, but I think if people have never heard of you before, you just left your role as head of Ticketmaster in Asia, and you'd lived in Asia for 17 years. And I only want to give that in case people missed the introduction. But the first thing I'm interested in talking about is because I know that compared to the States or even Europe in a lot of ways, the Asian market is a lot further along with their technology, especially when it comes to events and entertainment and things. Also, we have that they are a little bit further ahead of us in how they're dealing with the coronavirus and the pandemic. So the first question I want to ask is about post-COVID. What is the climate likely to look like, and how much of a role is technology going to play? What are some of the lessons we've learned so far from, China and some of the other Asian countries? And how much of this is just an acceleration of trends that were already in play?
Yeah, great question. There are definitely some differences between Eastern cultures and Western cultures. So, I mean, it's very difficult to put a broad brush across Asia because there's so many different countries there and things. But basically, most Asians tend to be very law-abiding and very compliant when it comes to being told to do things by their governments. There could be some reasons about that. Some governments are a bit stricter than others, like in Singapore can be quite strict, for instance. But ultimately, when Asians are told to stay at home, like they were when they went through SARS, which is the acute respiratory syndrome thing that happened quite some time ago, they went through that, so they know how bad things could get with COVID. But also they tend to do what they're told to do. So that means one of the reasons why I think COVID didn't spread as quickly in some places, especially in Asia once it was recognized, is because the administrations were very quick to close things down and the locals were very law-abiding, and they didn't think, well, hey, I still want to go out. Forget that. I'm going to still go out and have drinks with my buddies and things. So they stayed at home. And so that means to me that you might think that the events scene in Asia might rebound more quickly, because basically they've got over COVID more quickly. But I'm not so sure about that, because combined with that compliance to law and instruction, they're also can be very, very cautious. And so even if the governments are out there saying, don't worry, it's safe, you can go back out now, they're going to be quite, I think, reluctant to return that quickly, to be honest, because they'll still be a bit nervous about second wave and things like that. Conversely, I think the Western cultures are a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Less compliant, maybe, and would like to remain out and still going for beers and whatever. So I would have thought the chance of a second wave coming in Western cultures is a bit higher than Eastern cultures. By the way, I'm absolutely not a COVID expert, so I'm sure there are probably lots of health workers out there that may or may not disagree with what I've said, but that's the feeling that I have at the moment.
Well, that's fair. And I would think that I probably would have some more aggressive words for the way that we're handling it in America, but that's for a different podcast that I don't host. So, so knowing that the Asian cultures typically have been are a little stricter, a little more compliant, also a little more cautious. From your perspective, what have we learned so far that will maybe help some of the organizations, especially in Europe, since they seem to be having a little bit better success of coming back together or getting things in line, and then further down the road, when eventually, hopefully, things clear up in the States a little more, that we can look to either apply or emulate or learn lessons from.
Yeah, great. I think that what we're seeing is the events that are coming back, that the promoters are willing to stage, now are more aligned with things like timed entry, so that flows can be regulated and so that they can limit the amount of people in a certain venue at a certain time, and also then that the venues could be cleared out, for instance, every every 2 hours for half an hour so they could clean the venues in between sessions and things. So there are a lot of timed entry events going on. I think that outdoor events are obviously a little bit more people are a little bit more comfortable for attending those. So we've seen drive-throughs where there's the space in Asia, and outdoor events, being staged. So people feel safer that they can congregate in reasonable numbers without having to get too close to people and without contracting a virus because it's not a closed environment. And also we've seen quite a few virtual events happening. So I don't know if you're aware of this band called BTS. I'm pretty sure you are. It's probably maybe even the world's largest band at the moment. They constantly break records for the most amount of tickets sold in the shortest amount of time. I think they broke all the records at the O2 Arena in the UK, which I believe is the most profitable or best venue in the world. They keep on winning accolades about that. So they sold 750,000 tickets recently for a virtual show, netting almost $20 million for us, and they sold those tickets at $26. Now, I think that's pretty interesting because the O2, the series of shows they did, the shows there went for anywhere between £220 and £62. So that means that the virtual event was sold at less than half the price of the cheapest physical ticket, or rather a ticket to go to a physical show at the O2, was sold for. So, I think that there'd probably be lots of people, lots of bands and, management companies thinking, well, why don't we jump on that train to do, virtual events and maybe make, a fair bit more money. Incidentally, that cuts out the promoter. So the promoter might not be that happy, and also might even cut out the ticketing company because, you may not think you need a ticketing company if you can go and sell tickets online elsewhere. So, I think that's pretty interesting that the growth is probably going to be in those three main areas I can see: timed entry, outdoor, and perhaps virtual.
Well, you brought up the promoter, and that's interesting to me because one of the challenges that I see when I'm looking at some of these ideas that we're working at and looking at to get through the pandemic is, are people going to be able to make money off these things, right? Because, that's always my first concern is, am I going to be able to make money? How much of these things are going to be innovations that stand the test of time, right? Or some of these things, are they really going to open up new doors that'll last a little bit longer? Or, are there ways to limit these things or create them so that they are profitable for people? And I guess that's two separate questions.
Yeah.
And probably both clunky, but we'll give that to me being rusty.
Well, there's a couple of things there. For promoters, I think that they've got a real problem, right? They're going to spend ages trying to work out the risk about, do I want to, has my business model changed? Can I afford to pay the artists like I could afford to pay them in the past? Things like that. But ultimately, I would have thought the capacities for the short term are going to be reduced because of, social distancing and things. So maybe capacities will be reduced. Maybe the costs will go up because I'll have to buy more COVID-resistant equipment or shielding stuff, and maybe more staffing to make sure that everyone does stay 2 meters apart and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it sort of makes sense that ticket prices are probably going to go up, and I would have thought that the rarity of events will increase because I doubt you're going to get more events post-COVID than you had pre-COVID. They're going to be rarer. And conversely, that means that there'll be way more demand for tickets because there's going to be fewer events. So, you and I will think, well, I've got to go to an event because I've been starved of events. Okay, it's my third choice type of band I'd like to go and see, but hey, there's a band in town, so I'm going to go. And so, but the ticket price is going to be more, I would have thought. But then on the flip side as well, I would have thought the artist might also, in order for promoters to be profitable, I would have thought the artists might have to then start accepting a lot less money than they've used to because they still want to reach large audiences, right? So the promoters might say, look, I can't give you your $1 million anymore. I can only give you $500,000 because my capacity's been reduced. And really, this happens a lot in industry, the long tail's going to suffer. If you're a tiny band, and you're going to go on to try and sell tickets for a virtual event. I mean, how many people are going to turn up? 100, 200 or something? Are they going to pay?
Right.
So, maybe Adele's of these worlds are still going to be okay, but if you're a B or a C rate artist, I think it's going to be quite difficult for you to earn money, right?
Yep.
Because the promoter's going to be not confident they can sell out the event and things like that. I think it's going to be quite tricky for lower fame artists.
Well, let me
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no. You're doing a much better job than I am. Don't worry. But it brings up an interesting question because you talked about demand and pricing and reduced capacity. And one thing that I struggle with, and I don't know that it could be completely baseless for me to think this way. But when I see, I know the prices will have to go up because, that's just the way that things work. There'll be limited capacity. There's going to be more security. There's probably going to be, you probably have to staff still at the same level, if not more than you would before. But then there's always going to, because of the size, the capacity that you're able to, it's going to create an artificial sense of demand that may not be there. And what that means to me, and I guess, and the question I want to ask you is, how do you, and this is like really something that I really want to emphasize with people, and I hope that you have a better answer than I do. How do you met out the signal from the noise, I think, right? It's like, so, you're going, oh man, the prices we can get for these things are great. And, the demand is so high for these like half full events. And then as soon as like there's a vaccine or a treatment that sort of allows things to go back to normal, how do you keep from taking the wrong lessons from this period of time? I think is what, if that makes any sense.
I'm a little bit confused, to be brutally honest.
No, that's okay. I told you I'm rusty. I guess what I'm asking is, let me rephrase it then, because this is probably, this will be, it's how the sausage are made, or the ugly bits before is coming out of the pandemic, right? We know that in the near term, if we're going to do some outdoor events, or we're going to do some virtual events, or we're going to do all these things that are different, it's going to limit the capacity and probably going to be able to justify a larger ticket price. How do we keep ourselves from learning the wrong lessons from higher prices and limited capacities, so that when we go back, we don't feel like we can just dump the heavier burden on fans? Because a lot of places, the ticketing prices have been growing, so at an irrational rate. And I'm worried that coming out of this, when most of the countries in the world are going to be dealing with a recession, if not potentially a depression, that we don't end up shooting ourselves in the foot by trying to charge way too much money and overestimating demand and pricing capacity for people.
I think
was that better?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there is a solution. That is is redirecting money that's already being spent. I'm not creating money out of thin air, but money, to me, there's a massive GDP around an event, and that might be when you first select to go, do you buy some new clothes? Do you have your hair cut? Do you use Uber to get, or Lyft, whoever it is, to get there? Are you going to buy some, it could be lots of things. Are you going to go to a restaurant beforehand? Are you going to buy a flight to get there, a hotel, all these sorts of things? That money is already being spent, but at the moment it's already being spent, it's being spent in a very peripatetic way, meaning not, there isn't a platform that's collecting that money. So in order to allow promoters to capture more of that money being spent, I think maybe promoters need to start looking at ticketing companies and put a little bit more pressure on ticketing companies to provide more ancillary revenue streams for the promoter, so that when you buy a ticket, the ticketing company also allows for a channel for, to say, you want a haircut? We've got a special deal with a haircutting person around the venue. Or do you want some clothes? Do you want all these different ancillary revenues, which you're spending anyway. But instead of being asked to spend it up front on the ticket price, an extra $20, then why don't you spend your other $200 on your flight, all these other things you're buying, but just go through the ticketing platform or something that the promoter controls, and they get a clip of it. That's something that could be interesting.
No, that's actually, I want to say I was doing a webinar or somewhere this idea has come up before, and it's more of coming out of this, at least in the near term, is people are going to be a little bit more cautious about everything, like you said before. And so it's going to become more important to curate the entire event for people from the time they leave until the time they get back home again. And so everywhere that you can do to manage that relationship, it's a chance for you to create value, which puts your thumb on the scale of whether or not somebody's going to come visit you, and B, it gives you a chance to make more money. So I agree. I think there's great opportunity because it's also a trust thing, right? Because they're going to have to trust you. And I think the psychological impact of this is not going to be fully understood for a good deal of time. And, right now people are really great about like, I can't wait to get to an event, or I can't wait to do this, or I can't wait to do that. But then we'll see what people actually do when the time comes. And that'll be really kind of telling. So, I think that's interesting to me.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, something that we've definitely seen is an acceleration of some things have already been going for some time, like a move to digital tickets. I mean, physical tickets, I'd imagine at the moment people don't want to touch physical tickets, especially if they're being resold, which we might touch on secondary later. But the digital tickets is pretty interesting, right? I mean, like someone starts handing a ticket to somebody else who hands it to somebody else who hands it to someone else who coughs on it or whatever. I mean, that move to digital ticketing, I mean, across Asia, even though you touch on it, it's very technologically advanced in some places. I mean, go to Korea, go to Japan, they've got some really interesting stuff going on, but still ticketing tends to be physical. So I think we're going to see a move to digital tickets quite rapidly, real names on tickets. And the reason why that's important, with email addresses probably attached to it, is for track and trace, which I think will, it might subside over time, but once you put these things in place, it's quite handy to keep them. I think some people might think, especially more authoritarian governments and things. So if you look at Asia, for instance, I mean, Damai, the largest ticketing company in China, still uses physical tickets predominantly. PIA in Japan uses physical tickets. Interpark in Korea, SM Tickets in the Philippines, Systic in Singapore, Tixcraft in Taiwan. I mean, some of them have got some a little bit of digital capability, but almost always it's a physical ticket that's being sold.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know that if I don't ask you, then I'm going to get my my inbox filled with emails. Does this mean that we're finally going to see where blockchain changes everything?
Maybe. I mean, I know of, Ticketmaster have got upgraded, I think it's called. There's a few other blockchain ticketing companies out there. I quite like the idea of it. It's definitely going to take on the secondary market as well a bit, but this idea about, I've definitely seen it, where a ticketing company only fulfills your ticket if you're geo-fenced within 1 kilometre of the venue with 30 minutes before the doors open. I mean, that absolutely makes sense, in lots of different ways, stops people reselling them. It means that the only way they can use the ticket if they're physically near the venue, I suppose. I mean, there's lots of reasons. So yeah, I think blockchain and ticketing worlds are colliding. Yes, I agree with that.
And it seems too, and tell me if I'm wrong, but this is accelerating a trend that people wanted to push, of things going mobile. And so all it took was a virus to get all the big data heads exactly what they wanted, which is like access to all this data. So my question is, right, because the challenge I always had with the push towards digital tickets and the idea like, oh, I need all this data, is that we had so much data to begin with and people weren't using it very well. How do we make sure that, how do we make this data that we're going to have because of digital tickets or contactless payments, how do we make it useful for people and add value to them?
That's tricky. I mean, I'm going to go back to the old VCR times. Right? I'm sure you had a VCR, but I had a VCR.
I think I still have one.
When I had some disposable income, I went in to get the VCR had the most buttons on, right? But then eventually I only ever used the 3 or 4 buttons, record, rewind, fast forward and stuff like that. So, I mean, I've run ticketing companies for some time and I've always been a little bit frustrated in that most people only really use the ticketing company for a few functions. And I said, well, hold on, we've got all this other stuff going on. And really, I think that to get the most out of data, you've really got to invest time and understand it. So I've been blue in the face telling promoters sometimes, we've got all this other stuff that you can access via a back office that gives you downloadable reports and things like this. And what I found was, again, the 80-20 rule. 20% of your clients really got it and used 80% of the data available, and the other 80% of clients didn't even bother checking into the back office, and they'd ring you up every now and again saying, how many tickets have you sold? So I think that you are right. There's more data available now, and ticketing companies have got to get better at explaining and being consultative with their promoters around all the benefits that they could have if they invested a bit of time. And I think it's really worthwhile promoters sitting down with ticketing companies to say, well, look, what have you got? How can you help us? I mean, I had a case of a comedy person coming to me saying, well, my ticket sales aren't very good. I'm thinking I'm going to change the whole setup of the event because I think my punters are getting, my patrons are getting bored with the setup of it's always the same. And I looked at his ticket sales and I did a big report and I said, no, actually, the problem is you keep on having to acquire new customers. Your retention's actually not that good. So you're saying people are bored of your setup. That can't be true because they're not coming back to get bored. So you need to have a look at some things that you could do to either lower your acquisition costs or to retain people. And we came up with something that was basically saying, well, your average order size was 2 tickets, so why don't we not disrupt that? Why don't we still allow people to buy 2 tickets but get 1 free, and then make people do marketing for you by thinking, well, I've got a 3rd ticket that's free, why don't I hand that out to someone else who might be an advocate of comedy, and then you'll acquire more people, and then you've got to do a better job of retaining them. And do you know what? That's exactly what he did, and he was going to change his whole setup. And that's a big deal for a promoter to say, I'm going to change the whole way I do stuff. And eventually he didn't change much apart from just changing a slight way of marketing, and he ended up doing really well. I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, to me, it's always been a matter of educating people better. Because I think and I don't know if this is more of a statement or if I'm going to have a question, so forgive me for this one. It's a lot of times if we're doing, and this is the same for me in marketing and strategy as I'm sure it is for anybody in technology, is like we're so close to the challenge that we are used to dealing with, or like in the case of technology, so close to the technology that we forget what it's like not to know what these things do. And so I think, and this is a question that I'm always asking myself, is like, how do I do a better job of educating people to let them know what they can and can't do, right? Because it's simple when you have an example like this where you're talking to the promoter, or like the comedian, and you go, hey, look at this. This data doesn't make sense. But how do you make that an ongoing part of what you're doing? Because I think there's a lot of great opportunities to teach people early on and then it gives you a competitive advantage because let's face it, most of the time people aren't getting taught how to use things very well except after the onboarding process.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a fallow part in the cycle for an event organizer, and the fallow bit isn't when you've just gone on sale. It's a bit where you're trying to dream up what your next show is going to be or something. But, well, the reason I'm mentioning that is that invariably ticketing comes quite a long way down the list of what people engage with after they've sorted out the artist, and they sort out the plane, and they sort out the production, they sort out all these different things, and ticketing quite often comes quite last. And also that sales cycle ends up being compressed because no one ever goes on sale when they think they're going to go on sale. It always gets short because something happens. You never get more time, you always get less time. And so what I would probably say is when you do have that fallow period, sit down and talk to your ticketing company, because normally when I'm trying to explain something to them, they go, oh, if only I knew that 3 months ago, or if only I knew that before I went on sale, or if only I knew that before I did my marketing campaign, or if only I knew whatever. I get that all the time. And you've really got to do it in your fallow period to get to understand, what's happening. I mean, some ticketing companies have activations for sponsors, right? And and I've run a company that had an activation for a sponsor, and very few promoters use that activation platform because they all said, well, I've already signed my deals with my sponsors, and so I don't want to give it to them for free. I'm going to try and get them to pay extra after the fact. And you know what? I haven't got enough time because all these other things are happening and my event's about to happen. I haven't got enough time to talk to you. So I go, well, and they said, well, if only you spoke to me before, so next time you're going to do an event, come and speak to me before, and I'll say, why don't you, on the thank you page on your screen, and even the thank you email that you get, why don't you have an activation in there for a bank that says, do you want to acquire a credit card? That's very valuable to a sponsor if it's a HSBC sponsor or something, or whatever it might be, or a Citibank sponsor, or something like that. And they go, yeah, okay, I'll remember that. And quite often, they don't. But that, I mean, a sponsor, a bank might pay what, $100 per acquired credit card acquisition.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just say, we'll do it for free, but I want to share 50-50 with that acquisition. If 100 people acquire a new credit card, then that's a decent amount of money. It makes a difference.
Yeah. Or if you're talking about it from the idea of, like, I already have the sponsorship signed, and you have something that's really cool that's already a part of your ticketing system and you have never used it before, how about you go, hey, I want to do this experiment with you. I don't want to charge you anything. I just want to be able to see the results and be able to use this as a case study. And then,
very rarely happens, yeah. But I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to go back to something else, because we talked about how do you think things are changing. I want to talk about that acceleration. So we talked about digital tickets.
Yep.
So also about RFID. I mean, I have run a ticketing company that had RFID included in it, and I would spend ages trying to tell people that RFID is good for lots of different reasons. Your spend goes up at venues, your patrons are happier because they usually have shorter queues, and there's manifold reasons why it's really good. But ultimately, they always came to lots of excuses. Now that we've got COVID, I'm absolutely, inundated with people saying, well, we need cashless. It's really simple. They want to do it immediately. So I've run out of times I've gone into shops that never had cashless payments, and now they don't want to touch your money. When you walk in, they're waving at you saying, no cash, and they're showing you this POS, this point of sale system in front of them that has got pay wave now, and you just wave your credit card there, tap and go, wherever it might be, and then you just walk away and it's paid. And that digital transformation has gone from digital resistance to embracing it. It's incredible. There's a company in Asia called Pouch Nation that is offering temperature monitoring wristbands at the moment, and they are saying to people that we'll monitor your attendees for the 14 days before they turn up to an event to see how their temperature's fluctuating. And I don't know if you want to give that data away and stuff, but anyway, but that's pretty interesting. And they're about to, this is a world exclusive, they're about to announce very shortly that they're doing a first in wristbands for a very large company in motorsports in Asia soon, and they're going to announce that next week. That would be very interesting for the RFID wristband wearable thing, and that's going to come out very shortly. So I think non-physical contact with cashless payments and access control is going to be pretty interesting. In Asia, it's moving there. I mean, there's been one company in particular. Sorry, you want to?
Yeah. I was going to say, doesn't this open up the door for RFID, and cashless payments? It's also not just about speeding you through the line or doing things. It's also, going back to what we were talking about just previously, an opportunity to engage your sponsors, an opportunity to, really use some of that data positively. I just see money. That's what I see.
No, enormously. I mean, I was involved in a festival in Hong Kong called Clock and Flap. It's Hong Kong's largest music and arts festival, and they'd been joined up for years. They were doing digital marketing with in-house digital ticketing, and then they had RFID cashless payments and access control. And at that time, I was also selling sponsorship. So I would go to a sponsor, and sometimes they'd ask, how much data have you got? How much do you know about your patrons? And I'd say, how much do you want to know? I've got millions of data reference points. And they'd say, what do you mean? I said, well, the average person turns up for 3 hours, 27 minutes. They go from drinking, cider in the afternoon to beer in the evening to maybe a JD right at the end and things like that. I mean, I would throw the question back to them. I'd say, well, who do you think's the most profitable attendee at this festival? Is it the student that buys the tickets 9 months before, the cash-strapped student that buys the cheapest ticket 9 months before the festival? Or is it the rich banker who buys the ticket one day before? It's a 3-day festival. And I'd say, by the way, I'm not expecting to answer this question, but, I would say it's probably the cash-strapped student because he has bought the tickets 9 months before, so it gives you lookalikes on tracking for digital marketing on the types of people that might buy tickets. That person's probably got about, 100 times more friends than the rich banker, and they're probably telling people on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram they're influencing other people. And when they turn up, they are not turning up just for the best band they want to see. They're turning up for the whole festival, and they're buying more burgers, and they're taking way more photos of all of the sets and distributing that on WhatsApp and TikTok or whatever they're doing. And so that person is way more profitable and valuable to the festival and the sponsor.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive too, but I found this out when I worked on a festival in Miami. It's the complete same thing. You can't just take the dollar sign that they spend and look at it as the whole of their package, because if not, you're short-circuiting yourself. And this is what I think happens. It causes a lot of trouble with pricing just in general, because then you lose all of these things, right? I want that 9 months to be able to remarket to the kid, right? And talk to that kid, right? Yeah. Oh my God, here, every time I announce a new act or a new sponsor or a new beer or liquor or anybody that's going to be participating, that's a chance for them to be excited again. And they'll talk about something, they'll mention something, and they might sell. I mean, I forget the exact number, but we could track where it would be like one ticket customer just like that was a student. It would turn into like 7.8 tickets sold or something ridiculous. I mean, crazy, right? I mean, like way, and each one of those, and it was like you'd sell out, right? I mean, it would take time though. You'd have to think like that. You'd have to manage the relationship, but it completely did. Or you could have the person at the last second who'd spend, $100. The kid would spend $100. The other person would spend $1,000. But really, was it $100 that kid spent? Because if you got 7.8 people, that means you become almost $800. And that's also money you don't have to spend because they're doing your job for you. But
Yeah, lowering costs, absolutely. And it allows you to course correct on your marketing. If you're not doing a good job of marketing, you can do some A/B testing and change it and get different people reacting to different things. I mean, that's why long sales cycles are really important, by the way. You really have to have long sales cycles. And it also allows you as a promoter to engage more sponsors, right? Because you've got a really long sales cycle. You've got ages that you can keep pushing that message out in a non-intrusive way.
Right. And one of the things too, when you brought up that example too of the kid versus the banker, it's a lot of times too with the ticket prices now being, or there's two things. The prices sometimes are rising at a way that like don't match inflation. They maybe outstrip the ability for people to pay. At the same time, they're going on sale much, much earlier. The idea that we can offer people payment plans. Right. Yeah. To me, it's great because the thing is, if you miss the payment, I keep the money and I still have the ticket. Right. But it also just gives people the opportunity to buy. Right. It gives them another way to engage. Right. And I don't, my philosophy has always been like, I want to get you in because if I can get you in the door, then I know I can trade you up in any number of ways in revenue. And I'm curious about your ideas on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that payment plan is brilliant. It's like we're going to do installments over 3 months. So, you may not have that much disposable income per month. So why don't I split it into 3 easily digestible amounts? And that means that the funnel or the total addressable audience for your show, when you're putting on a show that costs $200, you think you only 5% of people in a catchment area can afford it, well, suddenly it's no longer, a huge amount of money. It's now digestible in much smaller chunks, and you'll find the addressable audience has gone up by threefold, right? So you stand more chance of selling it. But yeah, other things you could do, there's things like, there's a move towards buy now and pay later, which basically means you do reserve the ticket now, but you don't actually have to pay for it until later on, until maybe the show's actually going to go ahead. So, for instance, actually I haven't been very articulate here, but many people are probably worried about buying a ticket at the moment because they're worried it's going to get cancelled. And if it does get cancelled, there's been a little bit of the press about how easy is it for you to get the money back, or is the show just being postponed so they actually don't get it back for a while. But if you do something
here in the States, there's been with StubHub, Ticketmaster, organizations changing their policies around these things, or changing the classification of the ticket. It's been a big issue.
Yeah, so if you can do something where you're going to reduce that nervousness, like, well, how about we do something whereby we ring-fence some money on your credit card, a bit like when you walk into a hotel and they say we're going to take $100 off you for your minibar, and we'll only charge you when you leave if it was used or whatever. Why can you do that? You have, right, well, you're going to buy the ticket, we're going to reserve it, so we're going to ring-fence it on your credit card so we know we're going to get it, and we're only going to charge you 2 days before the event. Now, as a promoter, clearly you want the money in as soon as you can, but it's still a confirmed ticket. Right. And the only way you're not going to get that money is if the show doesn't happen, and then you release the money on the card anyway. So I think buy now, pay later is pretty cool. And also
that's a chance though too to offer different incentives, right? Because if you're the promoter, you do want to get the money earlier. So instead of just assuming that you are owed it, right? What kind of incentive can I do to make it feel comfortable, right? And, and I know another example too here is that, and listeners of the podcast are going to be not at all unfamiliar with this one, but refund protection, right? Booking Protect has some interesting data about what this means because before the crisis, I don't know exactly what the conversion rates were, but now they're definitely double digits.
Oh, well, in Asia it's gone crazy. I was actually just speaking to one the other day. Am I allowed to name the company or not? Is that okay? I've named a couple of companies already, but
as long as it's Booking Protect, you can announce the. No. You can announce whoever it is.
Okay, sorry, Booking Protect. This one's called Protect Group. I speak to them. Very similar name. Sorry if they took your IP. But I spoke to them in Asia because they've got some Asian data, so it's worth sharing. And that was before COVID, their opt-in was around about 8% for ticket insurance. And now, they've even quoted as high as 50%. It's gone absolutely crazy. And that is, a lot of bottom line basically going to the ticketing company. There might be a move towards ticketing companies, I think, sharing some of that revenue with the promoter. So in my opinion, that would make sense. But if I was a promoter, I would definitely be looking at if ticketing companies are offering ticketing insurance. Anyway, that's
I think it's this is an ongoing conversation we have here, which is you're just, I think you talked on it earlier. It's just giving people more options, more add-ons. If you're feeling uncomfortable, it just seems like an obvious thing to offer. And, it's, the reason that everybody doesn't do it, I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand.
Why don't you just say, look, it's a bit like an early bird, but instead of doing an early bird, you could just say, well, I suppose it's the same, but you can say with that buy now, pay later thing, so we'll offer you that, but if you buy now, it's $120. If you pay it later on, it's $130. You just or $140. You just say it up front as well. Giving people options, right? Let them choose their price point in a way. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say another way too. That's hey, as another incentive, right? And this is just you're bundling the thing in. Is you take the refund protection product, you add it onto the ticket price immediately, and you say, hey, look. It's going to cost you $100 today, but what we're going to do is we've added an insurance policy through Booking Protect or whomever that covers your ticket in case of loss. Or if you pay it later, right, closer to the date, we'll sell it to you for $110.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so either way, I win because I've either raised the price or I got the money early, and it's an incentive.
The idea isn't to take as much money as you can from the punter, because we touched on that before, saying you're already spending this money and perhaps they could spend it through the platform to help the event become profitable or whatever. But I suppose the idea is just making the ticket buyer comfortable, right? Giving them a better user experience, more of a fan journey, letting the ticket buyer know that there are all these offers that are associated with the sponsor. If you do this, you get this extra deal. Might be if you take your digital ticket into a BMW showroom to have a test drive, we'll give you a BMW hat and something else and whatever. That's before the event. And after the event, say this offer still lives on. After the event, take your wristband or whatever it might be, or your digital ticket, show it, and you take a test drive, we'll give you something else, right? And that way that sponsor's happy that there's activations ongoing after the event happens as well. I think all those things are really important.
Well, yeah, it does a couple things, at least to my point of view. Number one, it makes the sponsorship value higher, right? It also makes it much more likely you're going to hit the numbers that you need to hit with your sponsors. And then number three, it's going to keep your customer, your ticket buyer, engaged throughout the process. So then the thing is you create all those positive things like we were talking about with the kid earlier, right? Who's, oh my God, I went and took a test drive at the BMW dealer and I got a free hat or like a t-shirt. I got this like really cool festival t-shirt because I went and took a test drive. It's amazing, and
BMW don't actually care if it wasn't the person that they thought turned up, right? Because what would have happened in that journey is that maybe another fan who didn't go to that event said, look, did you go to that clock and flat thing or whatever? Did you go? And you go, yeah. If you got a ticket, can you give it to me? Because then I can go to BMW and get this thing. And you know what's happened? The sponsors reached a whole new, they've acquired a whole new person that this other person's doing their marketing for them. So in a way, it doesn't even matter if it's not the right person.
Well, all of these ideas go back to, and this is like a joke that I've been making now for 20 years, is I started out in nightclubs, and I go, everything I learned about marketing, I learned in nightclubs. And it was the same thing we would do. We did them with Jägermeister, and we did it with the movie Boogie Nights, right? It was the same sort of thing. It was just like, they didn't care if you got the target out of it. They didn't care if the person actually saw you at the club or they just went to see. They were like going, oh my God, we could follow it from somehow that person had engaged with you, and then they ended up coming to give us their money. And that's all they cared about. They didn't care that the whole line.
Free marketing. Someone else is doing your marketing for you.
They were like, oh, this has legs. The legs being the language they would use. They were like, well, and I was like, this is great. And whatever you want, as long as you're happy and you're giving me your money, I'm happy to. Now, what I want to do too, though, is because we talked around like stuff about making money and about the recovery from the pandemic, and we only touched a little bit on the Asian markets. But I want to spend a little bit of time, real quick, if you still have the time, talking about Asia specifically, because I think you and I agree that over the next probably 18 to 24 months at least, the big opportunities are going to be coming up in Asia because in the States and in the Western countries in Europe, it's going to be a little bit, the economic situation might be a little tough for the next little bit just because of the nature of the pandemic. So I want to ask you a few questions about the Asian markets because I'm curious about it. I had, like I said, Greg, our friend, I get a chance to go to China now. That's awesome. It's great. So one of the first curious things that I'm always fascinated by is that typically.
Sorry, no, actually, I've got to go. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, sorry. I want to be maybe the first.
See, now you fit right in. Now you know the tone of this thing. The tone is completely busting chops.
Well, the first person that's ever said that to you. I just want to be the first.
You've definitely pulled in a few firsts today, so we're good.
Of course, I'd love to touch on that. So what do the Asian markets look like?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to ask about, because this is always your audience, my audience is I'm always about how you make money, is that it seems that in China, and I don't know if this is true across Asia, that the Chinese ticket buyers, they buy the expensive stuff first. That's the first stuff to go. Why is that, and how do I make that work everywhere?
Why is that? The Asians like flaunting their wealth. Mm-hmm. and the Asians like the best of everything. So I've absolutely been involved where almost all the highest price tickets have gone immediately and almost none of the cheaper price tickets have gone. And that happens a lot. So it's all about, I mean, if you look at all the most expensive cars in the world being sold, look at all the most expensive wines, I mean, China's single-handedly inflated the price of some of the rarest wines in the world because they've bought them all up. They just want the best always, especially in China. Similarly in Philippines as well, I've seen it, Korea, Japan, they all just want the best. So, I mean, can you increase the size of the area where the most expensive tickets are? Yeah, maybe, but then what you end up doing is just making that front row even more expensive. And I think there's definitely, if you're trying to increase yield, you can create markets where there were never markets before, and one of those would be end of aisle, for instance. So people are willing to pay more for an end of aisle seat because that means you can turn up late, you can leave early, you can go out and get your beer during the show without bumping into people. So I think this is a whole new market that is untapped. You just say, right, I'm going to make a certain ticket more expensive, end of aisle, so you've got a certain size venue and you think, okay, I'm going to pick the average person buys 2 tickets, so I'm going to make the last four seats at end of aisle more expensive and see what happens. You know what happens? They all
People will pay for them.
Yeah.
This is where all the secondary market guys that I have that are listening right now are going, we've been doing that for 20 years, 25 years without technology.
Imagine when you're showing your seat plan and you do an analysis of what sales are like before you did this and what sales are like afterwards. Suddenly you're going to go, well, the end of aisles are going much quicker than before and they're charging more money for them.
Yeah.
That's crazy town, I think. But so you've got to think laterally about, obviously you could do the front row way more expensive, the second row more expensive, the third row more expensive, but end of aisle more expensive. Make them 20% more expensive.
And I bet you too that, and this would probably going to be one of those ones people are going, it would never work. And I'm telling you that it will because I've seen it work before. So let's say, depending on who our audience is, you can sell that back row, like those back rows at the end of the aisle for even more. Because people who want to get in, see the show, but get out and not get stuck with the crowd, they'll pay more for that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then, do you know what?
Nobody believes that because it's not house seats. It's not like going, yes, they will. I've seen it. They do it all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And then if someone's a non-believer, say, well, just give it a go. What have you got to lose? You can always change the price later on if they're digital. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, if you want to touch on, what the Asian markets look like, the venues and fees, are you interested in that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what does what I'm interested in is, right, because people, want to know about what the market what the venues look like in Asia and China, especially China a lot lately. And what I have found interesting, and I'll be curious to see if this is actually real or if it's just I'm making stuff up, because it's completely likely that I'm making stuff up. But everybody gets stuck on Beijing and Hong Kong and a couple of the really big markets. But there's this huge number of events and venues and opportunities in all these other cities that, I think they've been referred to as like second tier cities, but they are huge compared to American cities. Is that true where there's like just so much opportunity just because of the size of the country? And then what do the venues and, sizes and, the relationship between the venues and the ticket companies look like in Asia?
Well, that was a lot in China. So that's in China. I mean, Greg's the expert there, but on the ticketing side of things, I mean, there aren't many venue exclusivities.
Okay.
In fact, the only real exclusivities you get are in Hong Kong, a little bit that's the main place where you've got real exclusivities. The others some places have panels of ticketing companies, but most countries have open ticketing, which means as a promoter, you can go into any venue you want and use any ticketing company you want.
Well, let me ask you this, because you said Hong Kong is the only place that really has any exclusive deals. Is there a reason why?
Yeah, because the people that own the venues or manage or operate the venues happen to have a ticketing company.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because I guess what I'm always pushing towards is like, I'm like, typically what's happening where there's the deals are exclusive. You see that innovation can sometimes not take place, or it takes place at a slower rate. And so I was just curious, in the States, yes, the deals are paid for, they're exclusive deals, and there's lots of money involved. Right. In Europe or in other parts of Asia, they're not. But then you see that there's much more competition from ticketing companies. There's much more innovation as far as marketing and selling the tickets go. And I was just curious if that ended up being the same way in Hong Kong as it did in the States. Because I think it's an unintended consequence.
Yeah, the main ticketing company, there are a couple of ticketing companies in Hong Kong. One is called City Line. That supplies a white label to the government venues, and that white label is called Tix. And I've still got lots of links in Hong Kong, so be careful what I say, but it's not the most advanced of systems, right? And Hong Kong ticketing is a white label. It used to be supplied by Systic in Singapore. Now it's supplied by TG in Australia. I think the reason why they changed their white label provider was because there was quite a lot of demand from promoters to use something a little bit different. And one of the reasons why they were getting under a little bit of pressure is because there's another ticketing company in Hong Kong that doesn't have any exclusivities but is quite advanced. It's called Ticket Flap, and I believe that the other promoters were looking at all the things that Ticket Flap could do and then started putting some pressure on some of the other providers to say, you need to do things a little bit more differently, a little bit differently.
Yeah. And let me ask you this, because I'm not, again, this is one of those things that it seems from my research that I find to be accurate, but I don't know, right? Because I could be completely wrong and misreading things. It happens all the time. But the ticket companies, most places, they're kind of standalone businesses, or they're a part of just like the ticketing and entertainment ecosystem. But in Asia, it seems that a lot of the ticket companies are part of bigger businesses, either like real estate or tech, or they have the e-commerce aspect. Is that something? Am I making that up, or is that real?
No, you've done your research brilliantly there, Dave. So that's very, very true. So
even a broke clock is right twice a day.
If you imagine that if ticketing isn't their core business, then innovation and the need to and the budgets to innovate just aren't really there. So as you mentioned, I mean, in China it's Damai, and that's owned by a tech company. In Hong Kong it's real estate. In Korea it's e-commerce, and in Japan it's convenience stores. Like the list goes on and on. So most of the large incumbents are ticketing companies in each country are just part of a very large conglomerate that makes lots of money elsewhere. So ticketing either isn't that important, or it's a byproduct, or it's not profitable, because ticketing fees are pretty low in Asia compared with Europe and the US. So it's difficult to make tons of money. So maybe some of these ticketing companies are just seen as lost leaders in a big ecosystem just because they service a large audience that company happens to have acquired, if that makes sense to you.
No, it totally makes sense. It's just it's more of and tell me if I'm wrong, it's just a way to service the customers of the larger business. It's just an additional service.
Yeah, and that means it's pretty tricky. I mean, I would challenge many of your listeners to go onto a ticketing site in China, Korea, Japan, for instance, and successfully buy a ticket. I mean, they may run into language issues. They may run into lack of a local credit card, lack of a local ID, lack of a local phone number, lack of a local physical address. I mean, if you look at I'm finding it hard to buy a ticket for a show in Korea or Japan, for instance. You type that into the internet, you will find loads of companies, especially in Korea and Japan, that their business is to say, we know you can't buy a ticket. We know you're flying in from overseas, or you're a foreigner living in Korea or Japan or whatever, and we know you want to see U2, and you don't stand a chance unless we buy the ticket for you and then somehow give it to you. And the problem there comes is that, are you then going to trust that person? 1. 2, are you going to part with all that money? And 3, they're going to give you a physical ticket, so you're not actually probably going to get the ticket until you've got boots on in the ground, in Japan or Korea. So are you going to spend whatever it is, $1,000 on a flight to Korea or Japan, and then spend the money on a hotel, and then turn up at the venue or some other place hoping you're going to get that ticket for U2? And if you don't get a ticket, who are you going to complain to? How are you going to do it? And and then by then your wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is absolutely crazy at you, saying, "I thought I was going to go see you too, and I've just spent all of my monthly money on doing it."
I was going to say that it's, I'm lucky that I know people, because I don't ever have to deal with that, because you can't, there's no way. You have to go through I guess you would call it a broker, but it's different than the broker that you would imagine as far as tickets go. It's more like a broker for a real estate agent or something that helps you get the ticket. It's a little bit of a confusing system.
I mean, I did that I've been to Fuji Rock, which is an amazing festival in Japan. I've been many, many times, and every year, about 3 months before the festival was going to take place, I had my friend in Japan named Colin, and I'd ring up Colin and he'll say, "Oh, is it that day?" I go, "Yep, it's that day." He goes, "You want me to buy a ticket for Fuji Rock for you?" I go, "Yep." He goes, "Oh dear, here I go. I'm going to have to jump through so many hoops. It's going to be so difficult." And then eventually what I ended up doing, actually, I ended up contacting Fuji Rock, and I ended up doing a deal with Fuji Rock so that the previous company I worked for could actually sell digital tickets for them for non-Japanese people outside of Japan. But that in itself was an extremely difficult process to go through. But the process of onboarding Fuji Rock to do it. But since then, that ticketing company sold thousands of tickets for Fuji Rock, way more than their expectations, just because it was easier.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really interesting to me is, I think I said it just a few minutes ago, it's about the future of ticketing. It really is, in the near term, Asia and Asia specifically, but the Middle East also, because you have so many huge events coming up. There's the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. There's the Summer Olympics in Tokyo for next year, hopefully. Korea had the Olympics in 2018. Is that right? You got a lot of these. There's just so many different places. It's just a really, really exciting time. And I guess for me, I want to know, how is that creating innovation? How is that, what's that look like for somebody who's spent so long there?
It's absolutely huge. Just look at the amount of money that all these governments are spending on bringing Formula One to all these different countries in Asia. They're spending money marketing to try and make sure they get the Summer Olympic Games, the Winter Olympic Games, the Rugby World Cup, the FIFA World Cup, all these things. And then you look at the infrastructure build, look at all the venues that are being built across first, second, third tier cities in China. Look at all the theme parks, water parks. If there are a couple of websites out there that show all of the construction going on in theme parks and water parks globally, and Asia and the Middle East are absolutely dominating that. Look at Merlin and Six Flags and Disney. They're all building all these integrated resorts over in Asia, and really what ticketing has to do is really step up to the plate to make sure that to satisfy that amazing demand that these integrated businesses are going to have, is that these ticketing companies have got to see a bigger picture of integrating with car parks, with seat-dated hotel keys, with online travel agents. The level of integration that ticketing companies could be doing to integrate with Salesforce and all these different things could be huge. And generally what I see in Asia is quite a lot of these ticketing companies are basically a facilitation platform. You as a promoter send a punter away from your own online or physical asset to a ticketing company. They fulfill a ticket and that's it. that's pretty dinosaur-esque. You need
so many places you can lose them along the way. Every time you force them to click and go somewhere else, you can lose them.
Yeah.
It's just stupid.
Yeah, so, I mean, you need, with an integrated resort, you need a ticketing company to be not a standalone thing that just sells tickets for you. It's got to integrate with your rewards program, your hotel, your car park. You've got to be an activation tool. I mean, when someone buys a ticket for an event at an integrated resort, why isn't the ticketing company saying, "Oh, do you want to sign on to have a rewards program there for instance, a casino?" Extremely valuable, right? There are these casinos, licenses that are going to be given away in not given away, but that are going to be granted in Japan at some stage. And you've got to integrate with them. The ticketing company's got to integrate with their MICE. It's got to integrate with the hotel, I mean, think about the overseas travel agents, the online travel agents. I mean, these large venues are going to be selling lots of tickets of packages with flights and hotels and things. How are you managing that? At the moment, it's all done almost physically. I know that some of these integrated resorts are physically sending 100 tickets in the post to travel agents in other countries. And what if it gets lost, for instance? How do you account for it? I mean, and all these online travel agents have different ways of settling. Some might be cash on delivery. You need an API with discovery and payment, clearly. Some of them might be invoices. Some of them might be you sell 50 tickets and then we'll send you another. After you've done that, you settle on that. We'll then send you another 50. It could be monthly. How are you going to manage all that risk? I mean, when the head of risk and finance is looking at something saying, wow, we've got 1,000 tickets to our show has been sold by C-Trip, the world's largest online travel agent. Are they good for the money? Yeah, maybe. But what if 1,000 have been sold by some mum and pop OTA in the third tier city in China? Are they good for the money? Are they reselling it at inflated prices if it sells out? Things like that. You really need to have incredibly deep integrations in lots of different departments inside large, complex resorts.
Yeah, it seems
very quickly there. I mean, do you know what I mean? I think it's very
That's exactly right. And it brings up like a really important thing, right? It's like, and this is a bigger point for just besides Asia or even the conversation that we're talking about. If we're looking at what the post-pandemic world looks like, having stronger integrations in your system is really wise for three reasons. And I think about the last time I went to Vegas and the way that I tried to, I got a stay at the Aria, so then I was able to book certain things there, but then I had to go outside of the Aria website if I wanted to book tickets to a show and do all these other things, right? Yeah. It did three things, right? It made it easier for them to lose track of me, right? Because like you said, or the data conversation. The more you know about me, the longer you can keep in touch with me, the better it becomes for you. Number two, you're not serving me very well if I'm chasing all over the internet, right? And then number three is if I'm dealing with somebody, or if it's either your platform, or if I'm dealing with a travel agent or somebody who's a physical person, like a real person, it doesn't allow them to sell as effectively and efficiently as they could because they're having to keep all this specialized knowledge in their head, figure out all these different points of sale or relationships they need to manage, when it really should be as simple as let me go here. Oh my God, Martin, do you want to get the buffet, right? Do you want to add the buffet in right now? Do you want a ticket to go see Britney Spears while you're here, right? And just make it so much more seamlessly, because the truth is that the data is laid out pretty clearly that if I keep you on the website and I keep offering you things, that it will increase your spend if I keep you at that point of purchase now. The best time is either once they're on site and you have somebody really, really talented, or it's before they come on the trip, because it's a sunk cost, right? Yeah. But if you lose people and you get them off of the site, then it becomes a separate transaction and they make a different accounting in their head. It's all laid out in consumer psychology. So it's like an integrated system just makes a whole lot of sense. You don't have to sell me. I'm sold.
Yeah, I mean, let me give you an example. Let's use the casino example. You've got some high roller who's, your pit boss is rating him on the theoretical amount of money that he's going to make the longer he stays at the table gambling, for instance. So the pit boss gets chatting, okay, when are you leaving? And the guy goes, I'm leaving tomorrow. You go, oh, really? That's a shame. I want to give you a ticket to see Madonna the day after tomorrow. oh wow, I love Madonna. Yeah, we know you do so because because of whatever profile they've got. And they go, you know what, I think I'll extend my stay by a day. Or you say, you know what, can we give your wife and your 3 kids tickets to Madonna the day after tomorrow? And by the way, you don't have to go to the reception or concierge to get those tickets. I've put them on your key card on your car key. So that's how you get in. So, you use your digital card to get into your hotel room. It's already, I'll just press a button here, sir. It's done. And then you've got the tickets, right? What happens? The guy or woman may stay longer on site and gamble more, and you've given him a really good experience.
Yeah. No, it's exactly right. Everything you can do, to personalize is better, because I don't know that if you make things frictionless, it is necessarily as great as it's mythologized by people. But I know that personalization definitely plays out as being extremely valuable. And in this case, that's exactly what could happen.
Yeah, that's all that. I like calling that the segregation of one, right? Everyone gets delivered a different experience according to their tastes.
Yeah. And let me ask you, because now I know we're getting short on time here. We've gone and done the thing now. We've been here for.
So you need to leave me now. Okay.
Oh yeah, soon. Yeah, exactly right. But what 2 other things about Asia before we wrap up here, because I'm curious about this, because this came up when I was talking with Greg a couple months back. And I think because we talk so much about how many opportunities there are in Asia and so many of the different things that we can learn. We touched on it a little bit, but one of the things I've been curious about, and I've been trying to convey this to people a lot, is the difference in doing business between the East and the West, because they are entirely different beasts. You talked about at the start, whereas like reaction to the pandemic is people are law-abiding and compliant. They stayed home. They did what they were supposed to. But Greg talked about it a little bit more, and I'm curious because you had a different perspective. Like Greg is big on the venues, you were on the ticketing side. Is in the East, everything's like the government's job, or the West, the government's job is to support business. And in the West, it's a lot of times the other way around, where the business is there to support the aims of the government and drive, whatever the government's plan, especially in China. How is that going to impact what the business culture is going to look like over the next little bit? And, what are some of the things that we should be paying attention to there? And I don't know if I made that very clear, because again,
you rephrase it again, please.
Yeah, of course. I guess I want to get your perspective on how how doing business in the East is different than doing business in the West. And the way Greg described it when we talked about it was, in the East, the businesses are there to support the government. In the West, it's often that the government supports the business. And it creates a very conflicting experience for companies that are coming from the East from the West going to the East. And I think that sometimes it's a struggle.
I haven't got a different view from Greg. I speak to Greg a lot, and I agree that China's very prescriptive, and they lay out their 5-year plans or whatever they are, and then if you align with those 5-year plans with your objectives along with the government, then they will definitely help you along the way. I haven't really got much to add apart from to underline that Greg's correct, basically, which is pretty rare for me. My wife would say, "Wow, you had nothing to add," because I can talk a bit.
Also, I was going to say, Greg is going to he's going to love that.
Yeah.
Greg's right.
I think I think that there'll definitely be a lot more direction from Asian governments about what you can and can't do, I think. So, and the businesses won't want to challenge that, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And then the final thing I want to hit on, which will be like a payoff for a lot of the brokers and secondary market folk that have listened this far, is and because I'm curious about it, because somehow or another, I don't know exactly how this is, but I end up being the resource for a lot of people in the secondary market all over the world. And in Europe, it's different than the U.S. Everybody's different than the U.S. So I think that's really what it comes down to. But you said that there's a moving. How did you describe it to me? That there's a movement going against the secondary market in Asia, But right now it's largely unregulated. Is that right? And so that would mean in the near term, there's likely opportunities for the secondary market in Asia, but that's only if you act wisely now.
Or I come from a primary background, so encouraging secondary to come to Asia is definitely not part of my mandate. But having said that, I mean, you've asked the question, I'll answer it truthfully in that, yeah, I mean, secondary people have seen that the net is tightening with regards to what they're allowed to do marketing-wise and regulation-wise in places like America and Europe. And in Asia, very few countries have got much regulation, and those that have got regulation are not really enforcing it. And so I would say that I've definitely seen StubHub and Viagogo, for instance, get more and more active in Asia since I've been there, from almost non-active to very active. And there's a reason for that, they're being constrained in Europe and the US. And in Asia, I mean, I don't want to be disparaging, but if you're a less developed country in Asia, you're more likely going to be wanting to pass more important laws because you've got a less mature legal system. So you're going to be passing laws around, labour laws and things more than what are we doing about the secondary and primary ticketing market. So there is one country though that's moved quite swiftly, and that's Japan. They have banned secondary ahead of the Olympics. So, and I think in China it's broadly illegal, but I've never seen anyone get penalised for it. I think they're called scalpers. I think are called yellow cows in China, which might be a cause of laughter for you and other people. So we have to look into it. But I'm pretty sure a scalper's a yellow cow in China.
I hope so, because that would be really a great name. That would. Yeah. I don't know, like you could really set out to come up with a better name, because you can't laugh at that. You're taking yourself far too seriously.
Yeah, but there's something else that I wanted to touch on, and that was about very few ticketing companies in Asia are pan-Asian, which means they're siloed a bit. So means they only really they can only really deal with local clients. So that means if you're an integrated resort, for instance, and a lot of your sales are going to come from non-locals. So for instance, if you've got a casino in Singapore, Singaporeans aren't really meant to go to the casinos in Singapore. In Japan, the Japanese are going to be restricted. In Korea, the Koreans are going to be restricted. So that means that if you're thinking about using a local ticketing partner, well, they'd be good at maybe getting some local people to come, but you want to get foreigners to come. So it would make sense if you were to look at a pan-Asian ticketing company, or at least the ticketing company has the ability to be pan-Asian with multiple languages, multiple currencies, multiple properties and things. And so, it could be worth looking at someone like Melco have got that type of system in place, that they can do multiple languages, multiple currencies and multiple properties. So I would definitely look at that if I was a large promoter wanting to do a pan-Asian event, or if I was an integrated resort wanting to reach non-locals to where your resort is based, then you really do need to look at a more integrated pan-Asian ticketing company.
So that touches on what we were talking about earlier about some of the challenges in the cultural thing, because you talked about very much siloed, very much isolated, and needing to be specialized, because in a lot of cases there's no concessions made for a different culture to come to your country and do any business. So that makes perfect sense. See, this is why you have like smart people on the podcast, because then they help rein me in and bring me back where I'm supposed to be. So Martin, how do people find you on the internet? Where do they connect with you?
LinkedIn's pretty good. Martin Haigh, Haigh. That's probably the best way. I'll supply to you maybe a couple of slides or something if you want a couple of things that talk about this, so that they can. I don't know if you can put that on your site, so they can download that, and that'll have my contact details on there.
I can definitely, if people send me an email, Dave@davewakeman.com, I will make sure they get the slides. or if they sign up for the Talking Tickets newsletter, which they can also get by doing that. I'll make sure that people have those slides and get access to that.
And my email is martinjdhaigh@gmail.com. I don't know if that's okay to broadcast.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. And look, plug away. This is what I'm here for. Plug away. Hey, Martin, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Thank you for having me.
There was my conversation with Martin Haigh on the Business of Fun. Let me know what you thought. You can send me an email. It is my name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. Or you can visit my website. It's davewakeman.com, where you can find my blog, anything I'm up to, like the NATB's virtual summit on the 14th and 15th of July, right? Talking about relationships on the 15th with Patrick Ryan, Corey Gibbs, and Ken Sulky. Make sure you check out my newsletter, Talking Tickets. It is a weekly newsletter that is dedicated to the world of sports entertainment tickets, all that fun stuff. You can get on that by visiting the website of davewakeman.com, look for the newsletter tab, or send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com, and tell me to add you to the newsletter. It's great. 5 top stories with a little analysis and some action items. Fantastic stuff. Check it out. Make sure that you check out Booking Protect's website, bookingprotect.com, so you can check on resources and the partnership with We Are Wellbeing, so that you can make sure that everybody in your organization has the right help they need for their mental health. This pandemic and the fallout from it have been devastating for so many people. And I think some of the psychological and mental health tolls of this have yet to be fully and completely recognized. Booking Protect and We Are Wellbeing have put together some resources and some tools that you can find out about on the website. Make sure you check them out. Make sure you're doing the right thing to help make sure your teams and your people are getting the support they need, have their heads in the right place. It's extremely difficult on everybody. If I can be a resource for anybody, email me, dave@davewakeman.com. Send me WhatsApp, email, a text. Hook up with me somehow on the phone if you need to talk to somebody. Here's my cell phone number. It's country code 1-917-705-6301. Don't feel like you have to go through any of this all by yourself, and definitely don't. Make sure you check out the resources at WeWillRecover.live. We Will Recover is an initiative started by Einar and Martin from Activity Stream and their team. It's a really great effort. There's over 20, I think, organizations from around the world chipping in with their ideas, their efforts, their frameworks, everything to help give you and your organizations the resources, the ideas that we need to recover. It's not a solo effort to get out of this thing. So we're all in this together. So go to WeWillRecover.live and check out all the stuff that the Activity Stream team has put together, and find the resources that are coming from people like me, the kids at Stay 22, the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Australia, the TPC in the UK, NTIX, QQ. There's like so many people, right? Make sure you check them out. Made Media. I'm forgetting people, and I'm sorry, but it's just like so many great people who are just giving ideas and giving resources, giving tools to help make sure we can all get back together. As I think Maureen is famous for saying, we will hug again. It's make sure you check those things out. Whatever we can do to all get together and help get through this as quickly and as painlessly as possible. As I mentioned in the introduction, the idea of the Stockdale paradox has really been very helpful for me, and it's been helpful for helping me understand that you got to keep your head down and just keep pushing. And I think that's super important to remember now, because eventually any crisis ends. We don't know when it's going to end exactly, but we have to just keep moving forward. And like I said, if you need anybody, let me be a resource for you. You don't have to need anything specific. Just know that I'm here. as someone to talk to, someone to reach out to, someone to connect with. Because I don't want anybody to feel like they're alone or not. They don't have someone who's in their corner, because I'm in all of your corners. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. I believe this is the longest Business of Fun podcast episode ever. Check me out, davewakeman.com. Check out my friends at Booking Protect, bookingprotect.com, wewillrecover.live. Check out everybody, right? You need something, let us know. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.